This is a fan-generated show. If you'd like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our new Rumble channel. All your support is greatly appreciated. Good evening and welcome to the Glazov Gang. I am Annie Sire sitting in for Dr. Jamie Glazov. I promise you he will be back soon. But tonight I have a very, very special treat for you guys. You know me. You've known me for many years. This is definitely my favorite episode of all time. No disrespect to previous guests, but I've been literally dying to have this absolutely amazing and brave woman on to have a full-on 1-hour discussion with, because what she talks about is so close to my heart, and the way she understands it, it's exactly how it should be understood. Without further ado, it is an honor and privilege to introduce our guest this evening, Elisabeth Sabaditsch. If you're not familiar with her, shame on you. If you are familiar with her, I'm proud of you. She has a very long story, which we will tell you about, but she has life experience of Islam and Islamization and the insult and the assault that comes with anyone who stands against Islam. Hello, Elisabeth. Thank you so much for joining on Glazov Gang tonight.
Oh my God, Annie, it is so amazing to be with you. I've been wanting to talk to you for so long. I can't believe it took us so long to connect. And your introduction has me almost in tears, really. If I had time now, I would go hide somewhere and cry because it is just the sweetest. Thank you. You know, I already know that you and I are going to be friends forever. And I hope you share my dream of one day, you and me and others sitting somewhere in Iran, sharing a beer and thanking God that the country is free again.
Definitely from your mouth to God's ear. We shall do that if that is part of his plan. But until we get to that day, we shall continue fighting for freedoms of those who are there.
Absolutely.
Without it, and those over here are not even understanding how they're losing it. On that note, let's just start from back in the time. Tell our audience your childhood. From what I understand, huge part of it took place in my motherland. So let's just start from there.
Well, we have to start a bit before because we have to tell your audience how I got there. My father was a diplomat. He's now retired. And part of being a diplomat means moving around also to countries that are maybe not at the top of people's lists. So we began in New York, where I went to kindergarten and where I learned the English language for the first time. And where I learned the Pledge of Allegiance, even though I can't pledge allegiance to a flag that is not my own, but I know it by heart, and I always get goosebumps when people around me say the pledge. And from New York, we were sent to Tehran in 1977, which was the country of Iran. Or as I would prefer calling it, it's Persia, because it's such a beautiful name. The word Persia just sounds so much more beautiful than Iran, which I associate with evil against its own people. But so we went to Iran. We set up a house there. I was 6 or 7 years old at the time. We had a beautiful house in the northern part of Tehran, which, as you know, is the more affluent part and the safer part, and probably also the more beautiful part because it's closer to the mountains. And as you will also remember and probably appreciate, is the chup, those open canals running, the wastewater, they ran, of course, downstream, which meant that the wastewater passed us in the north and they went south and downstream. So we had a few interesting experiences with those chups, which I remember being algae infested. You may remember that too. They were always green and slimy and gross to look at. But of course, as a child, I loved jumping over them, and it was fun for me. But what was important in Iran during the Shah's time is It was relatively free. It was relatively peaceful, and one got to live the way one wanted, no matter what religion one belonged to. Religion was not at the forefront of people's minds. Now, I don't really know how people went about their lives in the countryside for the most part. Okay, so because I spent most of my time in Tehran itself, but I associate pre-revolutionary Islam with peace. Does this mean that I think that everything was great with the Shah? No, of course not. We all know that there were lots and lots of people imprisoned. They were political prisoners. Yes, of course, he wasn't the beacon of democracy and freedom. But as with so many quote-unquote tyrants, it's not all bad and it's not all good. It's not all black and white. If you look at Saddam Hussein later on, we all know that he was a bad guy. But was he bad with the Christians and other minorities, the Jewish minorities? No, he wasn't. Jews and Christians were free to practice and go about their daily business. So, of course, I was aware, even as a 6-year-old, that the Shah wasn't all good. But he kept the country together,
Let me
and it was
just
a good
insert
life.
let me just insert something. I agree with what you're saying. And the situation was, the country was free as a country because it was a monarchy. So you had the kingdom and then you had the government. So even though the
Hmm.
king himself, the Shah himself, was definitely too busy having the luxurious life and all, but he also did listen to his government that was built of a group of people who were Muslims, Baha'i, Zarathushtri, Jewish, Christian. So it was a very
Hmm.
diverse government that left. We actually had the system in America, in Iran, which there was a separation of church and state, basically. Because Shah
As
himself
it
was a
should be.
Muslim.
Yes, and as it should be. There should be a separation of church and politics and government. That is always to the benefit of the people. And that, of course, as you know, uh, went downhill dramatically when the Ayatollah, who was in exile, the Ayatollah Khomeini, who was in exile at the time in Paris, started sending his incendiary speeches and sermons to Iran and incited the people. Now, I'm simplifying somewhat because if you're interested in that time, there's plenty of books out there that you can read, so you don't need a history lesson from me. But what I wanted to tell you is that as a child, I do remember the change very dramatically. It was gradual, but it was noticeable for a 6 and 7 year old. So, for instance, I went to school, first and second grade. But when the demonstrations began in earnest, which must have been early fall 1978, because I was in second grade. Um, Apparently, I was not allowed to go to school for many days on end because there were so many dead bodies in front of the school, and of course they had to be taken away. They weren't taken away, so I couldn't attend school. So that's how it became noticeable for me as a child. So in December of 1978, my mother, my sister, and I were taken away from my father and whisked away to the airport and put on a flight to Austria. We were separated, and my father had to stay behind because as a diplomat, he still had to represent Austria. We would always return during vacation time, so I got to spend quite a bit of vacation time with my father. But of course, the separation was a challenge for my parents. And also, of course, my mother was very worried about my father because you know how dangerous these mass protests and demonstrations were. And as I describe in my book, uh, of course, Iranians can't distinguish between peaceful Austrians and, in their view, not so peaceful Americans, Canadians, French, and other nationalities. So it was always, my mother was in constant fear for the safety of my father. Um, Let me continue. You remember that the American hostages were taken, and my family and I were involved. Not, of course, the taking of the hostages, but taking care of some of the hostages who were held in the Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. My mother took it upon herself to cook, to prepare meals for these hostages, which were then delivered by my father's diplomatic car. So they were, well fed as long as my mother was in the country. And you will also see in my book a beautiful painting by the chargé d'affaires of the American embassy, who was held at the ministry. And I was tasked as a 7-year-old to write letters to him and to some drawings. And he himself then painted in watercolors what he thought Austria would look like, because he had never been there. And it was a very moving time for me, and one that, of course, changed my entire life, because I wouldn't be sitting here with you, Annie, and I wouldn't be a critic of Islam and its ideology, and not the people. Remember that. If it hadn't been for these revolutionary years in Iran that changed my entire life, upside down.
Yes, and that's the interesting part. I was born after the revolution. I'm a 1983 born, December of 1983, very end.
Mm-hmm.
And I have always said I wasn't there when the revolution took place. There was nothing I could do about it. Nothing. I wasn't even born, right? But due to lack of action and reaction by my own family members, grandmother, grandfather, mother, father, everybody, guess who paid the price of this revolution? I did.
You did, of course. Mm-hmm.
And that's where I will quickly take us to today, because we're going to do a lot of back and forth. Time travel happens today. That I tell people, a lot of people are like, oh, I mean, like, I'm too old. What is there to do? Like, remember, I wasn't born and I became the child bride. You may not be here when this revolution and Islamization and takeover by the elite takes place in your country. But if you have kids, if you have grandkids, if you have nieces and nephews, think of them the next time you don't want to take action. Because I'm pretty sure, I don't know how much of it you remember, but this gradual revolution went from gradual to full-on force in a very quick week. Because as my grandma always said, we kept saying, oh, they're just a bunch of young, hot-headed people. They're going to get tired. They're going to go home. Until not only they didn't go home, but they actually went full force in a week and took it. It was done. Yep. How much of this would you vouch for?
Well, I remember it went pretty quickly. I mean, it was sort of a wave that began. We saw the first, when I was researching for my own book, and I spoke to my father because he needed to help me a little bit with, to jog my memory. But he told me how we were in Isfahan one day, and we saw small protests erupting, and we were in a car, and we just turned into a different alley or different street just to escape these protests. But it built up over the summer of 1978, and then culminated in this explosion. It must have been at the end of 1978, and then of course 1979, or early 1979 in February, was when Khomeini returned triumphantly to Tehran, and the Shah left just a few hours before that. So it was very, very, very quick. And remember, your grandparents saying, "Oh, we just thought they were a bunch of hot-headed kids and students and so-called students." Remember also what happened in the 1930s, how the Jews would say, this too shall pass, and it's just a phase, and they left too late. And how did that end up? And look how bad the situation is for Iranians right now. I mean, it's always been very bad, but look at how the West has let down the Iranian people for so many years and not taking protests seriously, and you know, look at how many are in favor of the hijab here in the Western world, and there are women dying in Iran every single day, I would imagine, for not wearing the hijab, and they are jailed and they are mistreated and they're raped. And how dare these women in the West criticize people like you and me for saying the hijab is oppressive and it must never be permitted in the West.
Agreed. And you have mentioned some of these in your book, which I strongly uh, recommend our audience to read it. It's not about the history that is mentioned. It's about, you see, sometimes my point, Elizabeth, is ex-Muslim, born and raised Muslim, into a sheikh father, Quran teaching mother, okay, from Iran. We have Farah Prudence, born into a Christian mother, Muslim father in United States of America, taken back to Middle East, raised as a Muslim, found her way back to America. We have Nani Darwish, daughter of a martyr Muslim. And then we have you, not American. Exactly. You see so many of us, women, different ages, different races, different background. All of us faced the same scenario in different location, in different time. How is it that every single one of us are labeled Islamophobe when every single one of us has started speaking out, going back to the source itself? As you said, your presentations when you were doing the teaching, they are sourceful. You're quoting Quran, you're quoting Sirah, you talk about surahs. Why is it that me and you are the Islamophobe, but those who did what they did to me, to you, to Farah, to millions of girls and women are the peaceful Muslims? How is this, and why are people so open to accepting this scenario?
Well, that's a good question, and I've in all my years of doing this, and I've been doing this since 2007. I don't really have an answer because I still cannot wrap my head around this. I would even say dystopia. It's so far removed from what is true. I look myself in the mirror when once again I've been told, I'm a hate monger and I hate Muslims, and I'm doing this to hate Muslims even more and to incite people. That's what actually happened to me during the trial. They're telling me I'm trying to incite hatred. No, I'm not. No, you're not. No, neither is Noni. Nobody's doing that. First of all, I'm not a hateful person, and neither are you. What I'm doing is I'm raising awareness. And I would very much appreciate if these people criticizing me would stop criticizing me and listen to the message and don't kill the messenger. The message is that we have to look at Islam very closely, especially here in the West. When Islam comes to the West, we see that it is not compatible with Western civilization, with Western ideas, with Western history, with our way of treating each other, the Golden Rule, the Ten Commandments. It simply is not compatible. And what I have I don't have a problem if my neighbor, who happens to be Iraqi next door, practices Islam. The problem that I have is when this Islam that he is practicing interferes with the freedom of my family, especially my daughter. That's when I have a problem. Live your life as you see fit, as long as it doesn't interfere with mine and doesn't hurt those that I love and care about. That is what I preach. And Islam does care about us non-Muslims. We all know the surahs that preach that non-Muslims must be killed or subjugated or pay a tax, a poll tax. We all know that. But don't attack me for quoting those surahs. Listen to me and go to the sources. That's what I keep telling people. I am not the hateful one. I am just trying to warn and to educate. That is my mission.
Amen. That's interesting. Here, let me just reach right here. That easy. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm holding is the Holy Quran. See that? There you go. Look at that.
I
Reliance
have
of
the
the
reliance
traveler.
of the traveler.
I have reliance next to it. But I want to start
Yep.
from Islam. Because reliance
Yes.
is Sharia. So let's talk about Islam. Right
Yes.
here, this book. See those notes there? I'm not hateful. I read those and I sound hateful. You tell me where the hate is coming from. Me or the book?
Exactly. Yep.
And
Exactly.
you
But
see, Elizabeth, you're even nicer than I am because I even have problem with those who do practice Islam. Two reasons. If you practice Islam without reading this, you're ignorant. If you practice Islam with reading this, you're my enemy. Either way, I don't want to befriend you.
I agree with you. I agree with you. But yes, but you know what? This is an ex-Muslim speaking. You are a notch above me. You are an ex-Muslim, which I of course am not. I did also experience Islam, but I was never a Muslim. I could never be one. But I understand where you're coming from, and I feel so deeply for you and all those oppressed Muslims, male or female. Because remember one thing, Islam is not only antagonistic and hateful towards women. We keep forgetting, and this is what Wafa Sultan wrote uh, so succinctly in her book called "A God Who Hates." Imagine a religion that forces men to hurt and beat women they love. And that is a thought that I hadn't had until I read her book. It is a God who hates and who forces men and women to hate each other, and in the case of men, even to physically attack women. And that is something that just baffles my mind every time I talk about it.
Yes, and here's one thing I have brought up. I have not thought about writing a book about it just because I'm not good at writing. I'm a better talker than a writer. But they call him Allah. I won't even refer to him as God because the God I believe in is God. This Allah guy, with every description in Quran of himself and every training and how he treats his own creation, is the absolute and 100% description and actions of the Satan.
Thank you. My words exactly. My sentiments exactly. This is a satanic, demonic
Cult.
entity. And I agree with you. And it brings out the worst in good people.
And that is why I go back to, I understand some people, like in Iran, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, I understand some pretend or identify as a Muslim because they need to stay alive, but they're not. But when you come into Western countries, yesterday in London, there's a video. Mayor Khan of London with a bunch of other Muslims and some Brits who are not even Muslims is standing doing a countdown as this giant happy Ramadan lights go on in London. That is when I stand, I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Do you not understand within the description of Quran itself, within actions of Muhammad himself, and every single direction of Sharia within reliance of the traveler, Ramadan is known as the bloodiest month of Islam? Did Londoners just celebrate happy Ramadan?
They don't want to know. Annie, they don't want to know. That's the thing. How many Muslims have you talked to who have said, well, that's not in the Quran. That's not the Quran that I know. That's a wrong translation. Well, you know how many times I have been told by Arabic-speaking Muslims and non-Muslims and ex-Muslims that the true language of the Quran is 100 times, 1,000 times worse than any of the bad, I mean, the really truthful translations, that the language is so hateful and so um, dangerous for those who do not subscribe to Islam. Uh, I've heard it so many times, and it's even the most glossed over translation. You know, I have a Quran actually that is printed solely for those wanting to convert. I got that copy from the UK. Even that is already bad enough, and it's again, it breaks my heart, and my heart goes out to you that you had to go through this. But on the other hand, I'm happy to see you where you are, the beauty that you show, the smiles that you can show, the beautiful hair that you've got. Uh, that's what makes me happy, and I really hope that more and more women will find the strength to leave Islam, even though it means losing a family in many cases.
Well, I appreciate your kind words, and so am I. Every morning I wake up with the same smile. Just the fact that I still wake up a free woman. I don't think I have what it takes to ever be that enslaved property in a society again, ever in my life. But it's not just, yes, you lose family, yes, but unfortunately nowadays you're very, when I started speaking out, my very first public appearance of I'm done with this was in 2015 when Obama went to a mosque and said, "Let me be clear, Islam is part of Islam." I don't even remember what happened. I think it was PTSD or something. I grabbed my phone, I did a video, and I said, "Let me make a correction, Mr. President. Let me be clear, Islam cannot be part of anything. Islam will consume whatever it is start to be part of." And from there, it went viral and I started my activities. But since then, I lost my entire career, which was a very successful career in Hollywood, if you call it. I have lost many friends. I have lost a lot of freedoms, and I carry around 12 bounties on my head. That right there should tell you how peaceful this cult is.
And it doesn't. People simply choose to ignore it because the truth is also very painful. But you and I have learned to deal with it, and it makes us that much stronger. Because look, what happened to me, when they took me, when they infiltrated the it wasn't even Muslims who infiltrated my seminars. It was actually my own people and a girl, a blonde girl,
Well,
who
let me hold
infiltrated.
you. Let me
Yeah,
stop you there. Let's actually start here. Let's go back a little bit.
yes,
Tell
you
our
wanted to go
audience.
back and forth. Yes,
Let's talk about what was these seminars, how you got to
yes,
start doing it. I believe in 2007, and then we go to how they
yep.
infiltrated because
We
many
can
of
do
our
that.
audience
Well,
may not know.
let me back up even more. Let me say that my life has been very Forrest Gumpian. First of all, I was there during the Iranian Revolution. Second of all, I was in Baghdad, um, Christmas and New Year's, 1982 to 1983. So I also know the other side of the conflict between Iran and Iraq. Celebrated Christmas Mass in Baghdad, and in 1983, my father was sent to Chicago. So I spent 4 years of my life in Chicago attending school, where I was fortunate to learn the Constitution. I had to take a very difficult test in 8th grade. In order to graduate 8th grade, one had to pass a test on the Constitution. That instilled a sort of DNA that I didn't have until that time, uh, my freedom DNA. I fell in love with the Constitution, which I think is the greatest political document ever written, and that's what got me started to fight for freedom. On August 2nd, 1990, again a Forrest Gumpian moment. I was as a 19-year-old, I was in Kuwait when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. I was there on my own without my parents. The entire experience of being a hostage in Kuwait is recounted in my book. You can read about it. It was a very challenging time for me as a young girl, but again, it helped me grow. Fast forward to 1997, I returned to Kuwait, I started living in Kuwait. I lived there for 4 years. I was 25, and let me tell you, I had a really, really, really good time there. I had boyfriends. I experienced Ramadan. The first one was kind of fun. The second one got on my nerves. The third one and the fourth one, I was annoyed, and I protested it sort of in private by eating salami sandwiches in the visa section, which some might find tasteless.
I think it's
Let me tell you, the
wonderful.
salami tasted really good, but I needed to sort of show my protest in a non-violent way, and this is how I did it. Um, One story that I will never forget, and that led to 2007 and the conviction later on, was my job in the embassy was not only to stamp visas but also to survey the English language newspapers in Kuwait. So one day during Ramadan, I read the newspaper and I read something about the Islamic prophet Muhammad married Aisha at the age of 6 and consummated the marriage when she was 9. And I got up and ran to the visa section where I discussed this matter with our Jordanian interpreter, who had become a very close friend of mine. And I went to him and I said, Hussein, I can't believe what I just read. Is it true what I just read about your prophet and how he married a 6-year-old and consummated the marriage when she was 9? And this very friendly, funny man, his eyes, his face contorted into hatred, into his dark eyes became even darker. I was afraid of him, and he started hissing, "Do not ever speak like this again. You must never discuss it again. Religion is good, people are bad." And that was it. We never discussed it again. I turned around, went back to my room, to my office. I was very confused. But thankfully, I never questioned anything about Islam again. What I can tell you is, before I met my husband, I did have an Egyptian boyfriend who practiced dawah on me and tried to convert me. He asked me to read up on Islam, which I did. I never say no to a good book. And then a few weeks later, while we were driving in the car after a date, he said to me, "Well, what did you think about Islam? Do you like it?" And I made the big mistake of saying to him, "Mohammed, how can you actually believe this crap?" And then he slapped me. He slapped me, and that was that. I said, "You take me back to the embassy right away. I never want to speak to you again." And I ended the relationship that was going nowhere anyway. But that was also a very important, this changed a lot in me too, that you get slapped for being inquisitive and saying something that the other person doesn't like, which is what you find in Sharia. If you open Reliance of the Traveler, you will find a definition of slander. And his reaction was exactly the Muslim Sharia reaction. Slander is that which you don't like. So he had to slap me. I understand that now. So anyway, fast forward. Again, I met my husband in Kuwait in 2000. We got married very quickly. As he was a medical student, he returned to Austria, and I still wanted to add another posting somewhere just to make some money for our marriage. So I went to Tripoli, Libya. Another Forrest Gumpian moment. I was in Libya, in Tripoli, on September 11th. And my landlord stormed into my apartment, my Libyan landlord, and he started screaming, "The Jews did it! The Jews did it!" Yeah, it's the old story. You know it, I know it. I said to him, "Well, I'm pretty certain that the Jews have nothing to do with this." And I escorted him out of my apartment, which he had no right to be in anyway. For various reasons described in my book, I returned to Libya in late 2001, finished my degree, then had my beautiful daughter in 2004, and focused on her for a while. In 2007, I came across a book which was written by an Indian atheist using solely Islamic sources, none of the Western BS and garbage. And I was very shocked. The book is called The Misery of Islam. And upon reading this book, everything in my life that I knew and experienced about Islam started making sense. I started reading books. I started following Robert Spencer. I started reading everything about Islam that I got my hands on. And I knew that I had to do something. And by chance, the Austrian Freedom Party, which was the only party at the time that was willing to look into Islam closely, commissioned seminars from me. And they were 12 hours, so 3 seminars, 4 hours each, as you already indicated, fully sourced. I said everything there is to know about Islam, especially in view of Europe and how Europe is becoming Islamized, and how this was affecting society, and that this is really was at the time already becoming a problem, especially with all the halal meat that was being sold, and the many hijabbed women, and a change in society. You could feel it, you could see it. So anyway, the seminar was infiltrated by a young blonde journalist, surreptitiously infiltrated. I didn't know at the time, although I do remember her acting a bit strange. And the transcript of the seminar, the 12 hours, were then sent to the DA, who immediately pressed charges for hate speech. In 2010, there was a trial, and a woman judge, so I knew right away that she was not sympathetic to me, and the whole thing boiled down. I mean, became very clear very soon that there was no hate speech involved, because she played some of the tapes. You could listen to them, and you could hear the tone of my voice, and there was no incitement to anything or anyone. It was just simply stating the facts. But during the proceedings, she added another charge, which she is allowed to do under Austrian law. And she added the charge, denigration of religious teachings of a legally recognized religion in Austria, which Islam is. Islam is legally recognized as a religion in Austria, just like Christianity, just like Buddhism, like Judaism, and it enjoys special privileges as a result. I knew right away that I did not stand a chance, that I would lose this, and so it came. The
I'm sorry, just to understand the charge, technically, basically, it's blasphemy charge then.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
You got it, Annie.
Just want to make
exactly
sure.
it. Not leveled by Muslims. It was my own people who did that. So the sentence that got me in trouble was the following. It was actually a rhetorical question. I knew that you are not allowed, in Austria under law, you're not allowed to say the following. The Prophet of Islam was a pedophile. I know that. Whether or not you agree with that, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. You're not allowed to say it. So I said in my seminar, what do we call the behavior of the Prophet of Islam, who married a 6-year-old and consummated the marriage when she was 9, if not pedophilia? So I said, well, I understand that we're not allowed to call him a pedophile, granted, but we have to describe his behavior to understand the problem, because you know from Surah 33:21 that Muhammad is the perfect example for all Muslims for all time. Everybody who's a devout Muslim has to emulate Muhammad's behavior, and that includes marrying a young girl and consummating the marriage when they're at a certain age. Now that leads to all sorts of complications, not least that many girls die during their first sexual intercourse. They bleed to death. And I did not want this to happen in Europe. I don't want this to happen anywhere, because I feel for these girls. They are chattel. They are victims, and this behavior must not happen. So I said, what do we call this if not pedophilia? The judge then said, you cannot say that because Muhammad was not a pedophile, because Aisha stayed with him until she was 18, until he died. So it's not pedophilia. And anyway, there were many marriages between children during the Middle Ages in European monarchies, which is completely false because they were marriages between children, a young boy and a young girl. There wasn't any consummation of marriage happening. This was in Muhammad's case, in Aisha's case, it's a young girl and an old man. So that got me in trouble. I was fined 480 euros, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it was calculated in day fines, and I received 1/3 of the maximum sentence, which translated into 120 day fines. Because I lost my job, they had to reduce to the minimum day fine, which is 4 euros a day. So 120 day fines times 4 is 480. If I had had a job at the time, it could have been up to 100, 500 euros day fine, and then you do the math. 120 times 100 is a lot of money.
I cannot help but to think I truly wish I could be your lawyer in that courtroom. And the reason I'll say that is, okay, Mohammed and Aisha, fine. Back then, let's say it happened all the time, fine. But I would most definitely, in that courtroom, I would use 2 surahs in 2 chapters from the Quran, being chapter 4, verse 3 and chapter 65, verse 4. On chapter 4, verse 3, Allah says, if you fall in love with an orphan is an underage girl, that you are a guardian of, based on her wealth or beauty, if you can afford her, have her. If you can't, then go have another woman of your standard, 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Correct.
In Quran, you can fall in love with a child that you're a guardian of, and if you can't pay enough for her, you can have her. And then goes to 65:4 that says, if you're about to divorce a girl that has not reached her menstruation age, give her 90 days before you kick her out of your house. You gotta have to marry someone in order to divorce someone. So it doesn't matter when Muhammad did what Muhammad did, if other countries did it or not. The point is, this book is being taught in every single country. That means every single Muslim in every single country is given authorization by Allah to marry a little girl. I think I would argue that for you in the court. Not that it's going to make a difference, because yeah, I know
it made zero difference.
The fact that you can't even state fact, so you can call Muhammad's actions pedophilia. It's fact.
Yes, but that's beside the point in a court of law. Let me take you. Of course, I appealed, and let me take you to the second level of the so-called justice system in Austria. Of course, I lost the appeal. And the reasoning given by those judges was because I got a different reasoning in every court date that I had. I mean, they came up with the most ludicrous explanations of why I needed to be found guilty. The judges in the appeal said that it is a historical fact, parentheses, we don't know that it is a historical fact, but the judges, of course, know much better than you and I do. It is a historical fact that Muhammad married a 6-year-old and consummated the marriage when she was 9, but calling it pedophilia or anything else constitutes an excess of opinion.
What?
Now, yes. Okay.
I shouldn't laugh. I'm sorry. This is not a happy laugh. This is I want to scream, but I can't.
You should have seen my face. You should have been there when I stood in front of that panel of judges when they said that. It was hard for me not to crack up because it is so ludicrous, so out of this world. Anyway, excess of opinion, completely ridiculous. You're not allowed to say it. You can't say it. So we took it to the next level, which was the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court then said, we don't really want to get involved because they basically paved the way for me and my lawyer to take this to the European Court of Human Rights. And the Supreme Court said we have to weigh Article 9 and Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights. Article 9 is freedom of religion. Article 10 is freedom of expression. So we took it to the European Court of Human Rights. The appeal was accepted in 2012, and I had to wait for 6 years for the court to make its judgment. And of course I lost. I'm sure you're not really surprised. And let me tell you the reasoning of the European Court of Human Rights. It said that my right to free speech weighs less than a Muslim's right not to be offended.
You see, this is one of the reasons I love our First Amendment here in America, because legally I have the right to be offensive and you have the right to be offended.
Yes, exactly. That's the point. But not in Europe, so you better stay where you are. And that's why I liked the 3 weeks that I just spent in the United States, because I could speak my mind and offend people if I so choose.
Yeah, but here's the problem. Now, if I was to be a little less sarcastic, I'm sorry, when it comes to Islam, the only way I can handle it, it's to be sarcastic and make jokes, especially because as you started your book with, I come from a country that the Supreme Leader said there's no fun or joke or music or anything that would make you ever happy. Mm-hmm. Genuinely. He banned music, he banned dancing, he banned singing, anything except misery, grief. Like they changed the entire Persian calendar from all the happy holidays into Muhammad's death and Zahra's death and Ali's death and Fatima's death and everybody's death. Like you look at the Iranian calendar, to this day, every holiday, not even a holiday, but every calendar day of special days are people's or 12 imams' death.
It's always battles or killings, or even the Eids are all about killing and sacrificing animals. It's all about blood, and it's just there's no happiness. It's all misery.
It's if you ask any leftists, they will probably say kind of sort of like Islam is mostly peaceful.
Mostly peaceful, except for when it's not.
Except for 51% of the Quran that says kill non-Muslims. That's not a big deal. I mean, 51% is not really majority. But back to what you were saying about the rights. You see, it's all right to be offended. It's absolutely okay. As I said, here, First Amendment says, you can be offensive, I can be offended. But even if you look at the Declaration of Human Rights, and I carry a lot of credibility to talk about human rights, not just because I'm a human rights activist, because I come from a land that the very first known Declaration of Human Rights known to humans comes from Cyrus the Great, King of Persia. And no, I'm not somebody has picked on the fact that I celebrate Cyrus the Great and calling me a non-Christian about it. But anyways, the human rights says you have the right to be offended. Nowhere in the declaration from day one, Cyrus Cylinder, to today, in United Nations, in US, it doesn't say, based on the fact that you're offended, you have the right to hurt someone physically. You have the right to hurt their feelings back. If you're quick on your feet, do that. But the problem with Islam is if they're offended, Charlie Hebdo happens. Now, I'm amazed that European court or parliament hasn't come to catch up, but the fact that them keep defending their feelings isn't going to help anyone. It's just going to go ahead and enable them further and further to their own Quran of 47:35. Do not call for peace when you're superior in numbers.
Correct.
Isn't that what's happening in Europe right now?
That's exactly it. And of course, my court case wasn't really helpful in this instance too, because the court argued, the European court also argued that, I should have, in order to keep religious peace in Europe, I should have put everything I said about Islam in historical context in order not to offend Muslims and in order not to incite Muslims, the Muslim population. So it was basically an all-out appeasement. And what hurt me most in losing this case is that because of the verdict, an Algerian man has already been found guilty in Algeria based on my verdict. And that is very painful because Algeria, as we all know, is a Muslim majority country, and someone is suffering because of what I said and what I did. I never meant to have this Algerian man suffer, and I'm very sorry, but this fight had to be fought, and it's still a landmark case, and I apologize to this person, but I would do it all over, to be honest, because this history will vindicate me. It will also vindicate you, and the truth will always win. Sooner or later, the truth will come out, and I've had many people since tell me, we should have listened to you, and many of the problems that we're seeing right now wouldn't have happened if we had listened to you. And I can't help but think, well, why didn't you listen? Why were you so opportunistic? What were you trying to accomplish? This is not rocket science. This is not something that I just came up with in a whim. No, this was careful study. This was personal experience coupled with personal study, just like it was and is with you. It's always easy to accuse you and me of hate. But again, look at the merits of what we're saying. Look at you don't have to agree with me. I'm not offended if you disagree with me. That's what scientific knowledge and inquiry should be about. But look at what I'm saying. Take the Quran, take any Quran, and check the verses that you and I are citing. Look at the commentaries of the Quran, because you know just as well as I do that the Quran alone makes absolutely no sense. But read the commentaries as I have done. Why am I doing all the work and everybody else is just calling me names? It doesn't really make a difference to me, because I will keep going, because I know that the truth is on my side, and I'm just very sad for all these victims of Islam, and there are so many, and so many girls are hurting today as we speak. How many girls have been married off since you and I started talking? How many girls have been prevented from going to school because they were married off? It's just heartbreaking, isn't it?
It is, and I agree with you. Fight goes on. Truth shall be said. Me personally, I don't believe in my lifetime I will achieve the stop of Islamization in America for sure. Even though Sharia is already banned based on our constitution, but we don't have enough people with backbone to enforce the law. But what boggles me the most is, again, goes back to hate. You're hateful, I'm hateful. We got all sort of phobias apparently. And we don't even need to do what we're doing. You don't even need to do the research. It's as simple as look to your left, look to your right, look at a map. Look at before and after. One of the most brilliant, wise words said by one of my very dear friend and hero, Dr. Bill Warner, has said, remember, there are many post-communist societies, but to this day, there are no post-Islamic societies. When Islam conquered, it's been going on. 44 years in Iran, right? We supposedly took Afghanistan and freed them, but who's in Afghanistan right now? I'm pretty sure it's Taliban. That America has legitimized the government, and we are in negotiation to accept an ambassador from Taliban here in America. That's where we're going. So goes back to what you said. It's not about how much information we provide or we don't. It's the fact that human society has developed this uh, delusional fantasy of coexistence. You can't. There's no way you can coexist with someone who is willing to accept 551 of Quran. Oh, you who have believed, do not take Jews and Christians as your allies, as they are each other's allies. And if you become their allies, you have gone against Allah's wishes. What is the punishment for someone going against Allah's wishes? Behead them wherever you find them. 2 plus 2 equals, if you choose to be a Muslim, you cannot coexist with me because I'm a Christian. I believe in love. I believe in one God, who I am his daughter, not his slave. How do you coexist with this, Elisabeth? How?
We don't. We don't. And that's the thing. We see it, that we cannot coexist. All these Muslims who choose not to live according to the Quran, we call them the good Muslims. But in essence, they are no longer Muslims. You see, the only good Muslim is the one that strives to kill us. You see, and that's something that is so hard to wrap one's head around, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing this dystopia in so many situations. It's not just Islam. I mean, look at the world right now, how upside down everything is. But you're not stopping. I'm not stopping. I owe this to my daughter and perhaps her daughters one day. And I mean, you and I are on the record. There's no way that someone later on can accuse us. Well, you didn't do anything. No, I'm on the record, and so are you. And even if we lose, which I hope we do not, but even if we lose, I can leave this earth knowing that I did everything in my power to resist and to fight for something and not against something, because I'm on the side of truth, of peace, of love, of the 10 Commandments, of the U.S. Constitution. That is also all about love, basically, if you look at it. I won't give up. I will pick my fights wisely. Of course, I no longer speak out in Europe. I don't want to go through this again. I've been there and done that. But I've made it my mission to travel to the United States and remind Americans day in, day out when I'm there that you guys still have the freedom to defend freedom and to fight for freedom. It's still there. But by God, you're losing it every single day because you're not doing enough to protect it. And remember one thing. Once America falls, there's no place to go. Americans have a responsibility to every freedom-loving person on this earth. People, like you did, people look to America for inspiration of freedom. And if Americans no longer have that freedom to defend for freedom, there's no place to go for no one. That's the end.
Amen. I still wish we could continue talking for the rest of the day, but we are coming to an end of this segment. I really hope you do come back so we can continue discussing. And, next time you're in America, please reach out because we got to go grab a beer and cheese. I think you like beer and cheese popcorn. Yes, cheesy popcorn. We got to go get you some of that. And then I might just make you some, ghormeh sabzi while you're at it, I'm not the best cook, but I can do some Persian food. Before we go, tell our audience where they can go. I know you're not necessarily on social media, but where can they go to support you, follow your work, and get your book? Because that is a must. People need to read your book. So where do they go?
Well, the book is available on Amazon in the Kindle and Audible versions. I hope there's also still print books available. We're looking into this with my publisher. To support me, there is an email address if they would like to send me donations. That's always appreciated because it enables me to return to the United States and to rally the free loving Americans, go to the right side at yahoo.com. No, excuse me, the right voices at yahoo.com, and support me there, because of course, you know, I have to find my way across the pond, and I have no job, so I'm looking forward to returning to the United States. It looks like I'll be back in October, and I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of you on the road to rally the free and the brave, because that's what's needed to make America America again.
Fantastic. Again, thank you so much, Elizabeth. I greatly appreciate your wisdom, your courage, your bravery, and your time that you shared with us today. I look forward to having you back on as many times as possible, because I think the both of us could definitely scare a lot of people.
You and I think we're going to be this really great team, and I'm so glad you reached out. I appreciate it, and I am looking forward to that beer, but I also want that beer one day for you and me to share, maybe on the shores of the Caspian Sea, and
Oh,
toasting to a free Iran. That would be my dream. It continues to be my dream.
I definitely share that dream with you. I've been asked many times, if this revolution goes in favor of people, are you going to move back to Iran? And I've always said, I won't move back, but trust me, I will run to have one more chance at looking at where I grew up, at the mountains in Karaj of Tehran, and climb that mountain one more time. I think life will continue in America for me, but I do want to go back. And while we're at it, I'll have that beer too. I never experienced beer in Iran, so I don't have an image of it, but I think I can definitely enjoy beer while climbing that mountain.
I'll be with you.
Fantastic. And to our audience,
Two sisters, loving Iran.
thank you. I appreciate that. And to our audience, thank you so much for staying until now with us. And remember, no matter what happens here on earth, there will be a time when you will have to have an answer for our Heavenly Father as to, did you do what it took to defend your rights that are given to you by Him and not man. Until the next time, please stay safe, stay vigilant. May God bless you. May God bless America. Goodbye.